Hey everyone, and welcome to Atlas Insights, where we look at the customer service department within Trilogy Software and our AI-first approach to both customer service and automations in general. Today, we are very happy to welcome Braden from Voiceflow, CEO of Voiceflow, and obviously those who've watched the podcast before will know that that is the tool that basically sits behind Atlas Chat and was the gateway to an awful lot of the automations and AI implementation that we've done here in Trilogy. So welcome, Braden.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to chat.
Cool, excellent. So we don't have a great structure for this. I think it's better if we kind of just get to it. These have been pretty informal and up to this point, and I think it kind of works quite well. So maybe just give us the mile-high view of what is Voiceflow and what you've done so far.
Sure. So Voiceflow is an easy way to build AI automation. So we started the company about 4.5 years ago, originally because we got an Alexa and we thought it was really interesting. And so we were sitting there playing with, building different apps and sort of tinkering with the Alexa SDK, and realized that assistants were going to be like the next big paradigm for how brands talk with consumers. And so that was really like the genesis of the company. And so I think we had the right idea, and that's kind of been proven more and more to be true, especially with large language models and ChatGPT recently. But maybe we kind of had the wrong platform at the time. We thought Alexa was going to be the one to bring it into the mainstream. Arguably, it did to a pretty good degree, but I think ChatGPT has really sort of become the successor. And so that's when we started the company. Today have like almost 250,000 users sort of around the world. I guess thousands of customers, I can now say that, which is pretty exciting as well. Lots of big brands, Fortune 500s, Fortune 100s, mid-market companies, individuals, agencies, just all building sort of, AI automation. Customer support is really there you got it on the screen there. AI customer support is really the main focus for a lot of our customers, but really sort of goes across the board in terms of sort of what folks are building.
Cool, excellent. And yeah, I suppose we told the story in the Atlas chat, kind of one the first exposure I had, or we had as a company to it, was trying to build a voice system for our telephone lines. Obviously, we are revisiting that now, and we'll touch on that in a future episode around Atlas Voice. But I suppose, at what point was the pivot taken where it went to being chat-based? Because I would imagine that's the vast majority of the usage for you is chat-based at this point.
Yeah, and it's funny, obviously being called Voiceflow, you would assume that the majority of our usage is voice. And that's really a legacy from, when we started focus on voice, because Alexa was the platform we chose, right? That's a voice interface assistant. I think the pivot to chat really came when we started to think about assistants in almost like a central operating system way, where they're decoupled from the interface. And so at Voiceflow, how the nomenclature we've sort of developed now is you have your agent, which is a central agent which can run across all channels and interfaces. And then Alexa is an interface, SMS is an interface, web chat is an interface. And so when you start to view your assistant in that kind of architecture, chat is really the main, it's even a voice interface gets translated to chat, right? So at the end of the day, it's just sort of like an extra translation layer. And so once we started to do it that way, and we started to expose all of our APIs, and they were all text APIs, chat, was just a much bigger, it's not that it's a bigger market, it's that's where a lot of the innovation happened, was in chat the past sort of like 10 years. Like call centers have really, there's just a lot of legacy vendors. It's like that stack, even though it's a huge market, has really been sort of held back, versus it feels like with web chat, because startups are able to own the interface a little bit more, there's been a lot more innovation. And so the second that we moved to that architecture where it was a central agent, decoupled interfaces, chat just naturally blew up, and within like a year or two, it had sort of passed voice. And today it's maybe like 65-35 in terms of like chat to voice. So it's not like crazy dominant, but it's certainly the majority.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's amusing as well, because obviously when you're testing one or the other. They're the exact same tools in your interface. You wouldn't know except for the layer above it. And obviously then there are some caveats, like your prompts change because and a shout out to June, the original Voiceflow person that we spoke about. Like in terms of when you're prompting for a chat bot that's going out over voice, there's just certain nuances, like don't speak for as long, don't, because you think, oh, it's the same, but there are some caveats. And I suppose kind of touching back in on the API stuff that you talked about, like, I mean, I think in terms of the developer side of things, that's what is the secret sauce from our perspective, because we're quite technical as a group. So, and I can see how somebody who's not technical could use it for, the tools that are there, but this is where we really build on it. And is that seems to be a core focus for yourselves?
Yeah, Voiceflow's core strategy really relies on sort of three pillars. One is an incredible creation experience, and so that's going to be predominantly our GUI. So we started really focusing on conversation design and like having sort of the world's best collaboration interface. We started that a couple of years ago. We made big investments, and I think today, I think undoubtedly Voiceflow sort of has the best in class visual interface. But with a visual interface, I find where a lot of no code, sort of like low code tools fall down is if they don't expose enough APIs, if they don't have a developer toolkit behind the scenes, quickly you can start to hit ceilings, right? Where let's say, for example, there's a particular widget like a date selector that you need. If we're simply a no code tool, Voiceflow now has to go build that date selector, or you need an integration with Genesis. Now we have to go build that integration with Genesis. And so we wanted to have the strategy of having a really opinionated, easy to use, powerful graphic interface that is opinionated, where it's not going to have every single feature. Because if you have everything under the sun, you quickly become too complex, right? Like that's kind of the paradox with GUIs. If you have every widget, it's hard to, you can't use it. So instead, we had to have a really robust developer toolkit behind the scenes, and we're constantly adding to that to allow you to add backdoors, to allow you to add your own custom functionality. And so giving people a really strong base that's easy to use, and then to extend it to wherever Trilogy needs. Because you guys are going to have very different needs than another customer of ours, and you guys can both customize the interface to start easy and then make it more powerful over time. So those are like the two big pillars for us: is creation experience and extensibility. And the last is collaboration. This was a big part of the reason we started Voiceflow in the first place. When we looked to a lot of the tools out there, they were sort of like single player experiences. It was not built for product teams. And the trend that we've been seeing over the past couple of years now is conversational AI product teams like yourselves are becoming like the new norm. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be like you sell to the business line, they're non-technical users, or you go to an Accenture or something to have them come and do the implementation for you. But now with these conversational AI product teams that have their own developers, their own expertise in conversation design, their own PMs, like their own technical folks, how do you have all those folks work together in a single sort of unified workspace, help them with workflows, permissioning, like different parts of the design cycle, a lot of things that the traditional development tools just weren't thinking about. It was meant for like a single developer or like an agency. It's a bit of a different approach. So that's our strategy: best creation experience, best developer extensibility, and collaboration, and everything else, we'll get there eventually, but those are our three cores.
Cool. And I mean, it kind of shines through. I know when we were doing, when we did the big ramp up, so when we went from that one proof of concept to now the 80 products or thereabouts, I think we had 36 people at one point in there building flows and building out for each product and adding in bits and pieces. So it's always interesting to see, like, I mean, we were all able to work. We were able to, copy paste what we needed from somebody else's, move it in. You could see what changes were taking place. So it definitely stands to it. And as well, I was looking, there was a rather viral AI failure for a voice or for a chatbot over, I'm presuming, I'm not sure if you saw it, but basically because they just plugged an LLM into a chat, and it was just the LLM just responding back and forth. So it was just like having a conversation with GPT, and that is a recipe for disaster.
We made, so, Voiceflow predates ChatGPT. And when ChatGPT came out, very much like Trilogy, our company strategy quickly shifted to, we're going to be AI first. Now, what does that mean? For us, it was, we are going to experiment and throw as much crap at the walls we can to just understand how like, you know, how capable is this stuff, right? Because I think what challenges a lot of executives is you can kind of get lost in theoretical land, where, okay, well, here's the technology today. What if this happens? Eventually you just hit like enough what ifs where, you're at AGI and none of our SaaS companies really matter at all anyways. And so, at some point you need to sort of put a line in the sand and just say, okay, we're going to, stop the theoreticals here and we're just going to go try things. Right. And so when ChatGPT first launched, like in January of 2023, we had a live LM bot on our site, and our wrapper prompt wasn't very good at the time. And I remember we actually had a customer come in and they said, hey, I'm having a heart attack, to our customer support bot. And now they were clearly just messing with it, but our customer support bot responded saying, okay, I've called an ambulance. And then they respond, when will they be there? And our thing said like 5 minutes, like please hold on, or something like that. And our legal team, first of all, freaked out, of course, when they saw that. This was, the bot had been performing well, but it was essentially just like a very thin wrapper on top of ChatGPT. And that's when we realized how big of an opportunity there is to be the guardrails, because ultimately these are the probabilistic models. And for businesses, you need some level of determinism. And that's even with humans today, right? If you're a Starbucks barista, you might not have access to the back storeroom, right? You might not have access to the manager's room. Like I might not give you the key to the shop. Those are deterministic controls that store has put in place for its employees. And you want to do the same thing for your LLM models, right? You want to have guardrails in which it can play with and execute and do its job. And so, we had a similar experience like that. I just thought it was funny that a year after ChatGPT, this is not experimentation phase anymore. I was shocked that an enterprise did that. And there was the same thing with the Ford. Sorry, it wasn't Ford. There was a car dealership that did the exact same thing. Like these really goofy examples are coming out where I don't know if it's the vendor's fault or if it's the company just not knowing any better, but you should not be plugging in just a raw ChatGPT or your support bot.
No, and as well, I mean, if that's the interface that you provided, knowing what we know about how it is structured in the background, it's going to be of no use to anyone because it can do nothing. It can just placate you. It can say, they're there, your parcel's missing, they're there, we lost your car. There's no functionality, which is why, when we were doing Atlas Chat and with Voiceflow, it was the being able to say, okay, look, the LLM can manage this part of the conversations, but then we need it to be very strong because as well, you're doing API calls to our systems. It can't be, I've predicted the words you want me to say, and those words are now going to be an API call that will work. So it's that nice marrying of the two.
Totally.
And it does, it's scalable,
Kind of the way I frame this to our team is pre-large language models, conversational AI had the language understanding and the business logic were tightly coupled. In that, imagine you're training a Starbucks barista, to go back to that example. You had to both teach that barista how to speak English or, whatever language, you needed for them, as well as how to work at Starbucks. What's amazing about LLMs is now you've decoupled the language understanding from the business logic. And so you can have all the business logic and just focus on building that out, knowing that the large language model will be able to, with some degree, understand what's going on and be able to flow through the conversation. Because before, the reason chatbots used to have such a bad reputation is because when you couple language understanding with business logic, it just creates way more edge cases, way more pockets where the logic breaks or the bot doesn't understand, and it all kind of breaks down. But with this decoupling, you still need to have some level of business logic, and I don't foresee that changing, to be honest. For I don't know, at least the next 3 years. Like we're constantly thinking about, okay, like what's next? And I think as the models get better, I think the prompts will get simpler to write. Like I think the model, almost think of it today, like really smart people, you can generally give them a piece of information and they'll kind of implicitly understand it maybe better than others. And I
Mm,
kind of view the models as the same way. It's not that their capabilities are going to grow to some crazy degree, and I think they will over time. But I think it's just that the prompts today. I'm sure on the Trilogy side, I haven't taken a look at your guys' prompts, but we've shared some of the prompts that we've
mm,
used at Voiceflow. They're very like succinct and kind of hard to read because like you have to be so precise to get these models to do what you want to do unless or you have to break the prompt into multiple sub prompts and things and then you're going back to just more deterministic logic. So yeah, like LLMs are both the dumbest and the smartest technology I've used in the past couple of years.
yeah, no, they are. And as well, like, because I've seen examples of prompts that read fabulously. They look like a War and Peace book. They're 2 pages of an A4 just written out. And if you were looking at it, you're like, oh my God, this will be the most amazing content. And
Yeah.
maybe 1 out of 6 times you run it, you'll get what you want. But that was just, 1 out of 6. It's not scale. You need to be so precise. And what was the example? There was one we had where we were experimenting where you asked GPT to draw you a room, but do not put a pink elephant or a car in it. And 9 times out of 10, it will put a pink car because it's just there thinking about it, going, "Oh, I can't do it," and it obviously puts it in. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's quite a structured way that it's been done, and it works very well. In terms of any kind of use cases, I mean, obviously we see ourselves. We're a tech company, broad spectrum of products. Are there any other implementations that kind of stick without? You don't have to name names, particularly if they're a competitor. But if where things that are being done with the bot, where you go, yeah, that's impressive.
I mean, I can just give you an example. I use Voiceflow's knowledge base personally sometimes, and right now we're hiring for a senior full stack and a member of our HR teams on maternity leave, and so I've been like looking at resumes, and I had 200 plus resumes to go through, and I actually just dropped a bunch of resumes into my own instance of Voiceflow and asked GPT to like, hey, here's the job description. Here's 200 resumes. Who are the 5 best candidates based off this job description? So, like saves a ton of time.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of amazing. Same thing. We actually had a member of our team. We were going through like a German contract. Uploaded their German contract and was able to basically ask questions that we normally would have had to like retain a German law firm. We just had questions, it wasn't anything
Yeah.
super serious, but it was able to translate it and then answer questions about the document, which was very useful for us as well. So those are just like some internal use cases. We also have our own customer support bot, of course, Tico, and actually I'll give one more really interesting use case. We have this large Discord community, which is I think it's like over 6,000 developers at this point, and there's just a lot of questions in there, and often those questions have been answered before, or they're simple questions. People they don't want to go read the documentation, so they'll ask a question. And we built a bot, which it was our Tico bot with an interface of Discord, where if a user asks a question in that community, it reads every single question. It then checks our knowledge base to see, hey, is this something I can answer? We then put it through a confidence threshold. And then if it's able to answer, it will automatically just respond to that person in the Discord community. And so it's kind of like having your customer support deeply embedded into the
Mm-hmm.
community. And then the goal is over time, we're indexing not just the things that we can answer, but the things that we couldn't answer and another community member answered for them. So now suddenly you're starting to have humans helping humans that then creates documentation, which can go back into our documentation. We want to then automatically generate documentation for that new answer. And so over time, you kind of have this loop where, you have a large community that's creating documentation, getting answers from it. And, ultimately, you kind of have the collective knowledge of all Voiceflow users in a single place. That's kind of the goal. So those are some Voiceflow cases. Other than that, I mean, we've seen automated drive-throughs as an interesting use case. A lot of entertainment, actually. That's been kind of interesting, like, games and things that weren't possible before because you had to, deterministically write out all the paths, but now it can be infinite scope. Like we actually saw a role playing game built on Voiceflow, which was quite cool. Where all the
Oh, cool.
NPCs were models. Trying to think what else. Internal automation is a big one. HR onboarding. I've seen a company doing that recently. Yeah, just like a lot of internal use cases. I think customer support has always been the focus for conversational AI because it has had the most clear ROI and just like obvious use case, right? Like Trilogy
Hmm.
can very clearly say, hey, we now spend X, amount of money per conversation. Before it used to be Y. Here's the ROI. Um,
Hmm.
and when bots were more expensive to build pre-chat GBT, that equation still held up. It was a little bit more frustrating, but it still held up. Now that bots, for sake of just conversation, let's say they've gotten 10x cheaper with ChatGPT, and I don't know what the exact phrases, but if it's an order of magnitude cheaper, we're now
Hmm.
starting to see lower ROI use cases, things that have maybe lower volume, medium volume, less
Hmm.
value, but now the ROI statement to automate them makes sense. Before, it didn't make sense to invest $50,000 to automate this HR onboarding bot, but hey, if it's only $1,000 now, okay, well now that maybe that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that's been really interesting seeing the explosion of like use cases, especially from the bottoms up. Now that the ROI statement for so many more use cases makes sense because the cost of actually getting to market has gone down by 10x.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And yeah, sure. I mean, you can see ourselves, as I said, we have 80 something bots deployed. And actually, just touching on the mentioning that you had of the knowledge base search. I mean, I like as well the fact that your knowledge base system, the querying system, is actually open at API level, so we can at least you can double it up, because that's the other thing, maintaining 16 different knowledge bases for different systems. Whereas we make use of that with our Atlas ticket platform. We pull you for an L1 ticket because your knowledge base articles are there. They're chunked. They're well sorted. I mean, we had some, and we discussed this on the Atlas chat we had a couple of weeks back. But like, there were some teething issues. But once you get it right, you get the prompt right, and you get the guidance right, it's incredibly powerful.
So yeah, and like we have plans right now where so Voiceflow still has a wrapper prompt on top of it. We
Hmm.
have plans to expose that wrapper prompt as well, and so um, giving our customers full flexibility to be able to just like customize the system to any level that you need, right? And so
Hmm.
our whole product philosophy is always like give a very easy default, which is what we have today, and then unlock the back door, right? And allow customers to really stretch it, customize it, go further. Same thing with the API. We have a really nice simple GUI, but the API actually has more features than the GUI has. You have access to like knowledge base tags and things. We don't even have that in the GUI yet, because we actually thought it was going to be a little bit too complex for the GUI, and so maybe over time we'll add some of those things in. But having that duality of you have developer resources, you guys know what you're doing. Here's the API. That's full functionality. You're a
Yeah.
less technical team, maybe. Okay, great. Here's a really simple GUI. Don't worry about the API. We think that that gives customers sort of the best of both worlds, where they can choose this, not the skill level, but the capability of each team, and how they want to use Voiceflow.
Cool. Yeah, no, it makes sense. In terms of, and I know we're going to run out of time. So in terms of other things, I mean, we could spend ages talking about intent capture and how, like, I mean, and that has been a wonderful exponential increase in quality to this point, and continues to be, which is great. But I mean, in terms of the next year for Voiceflow, what can we in Trilogy look forward to building extra?
Yeah. Hmm. I think it's in a couple buckets. So one is agent. Okay, I'm gonna break it to a few buckets. There's
Hmm.
agent scale. Um, so Trilogy's the best example of this because you have 80 agents, right? How how do you start to create reusable libraries, like really tie the agents all together, like and really
Hmm.
allow for that scale, not just of the size of one agent, but ability to manage 80 agents in a way that's really practical and easy, and
Hmm.
sort of has a lot of like org wide systems in place. That's been a big focus for us. And so to do that, we had to break over data structures to be a lot more modular. So now suddenly all the intents, all the entities, all the variables, all the functions, you can kind of see it being broken out in the new content management system we'd launched recently. Our goal is to break up every single piece of the assistant into its own object type, and that will then allow those object types to be shared across assistants and managed across assistants as well, right? So, even down to, let's say you build a function which is you want to send a Twilio SMS. How do you have that running in 6 different agents, and you can push changes that propagates across all 6 agents? Maybe you can break an instance and have it be work differently for specific for one. Like, we want to get to that level where organizations are not thinking just about one agent; they're thinking about automating the entire organization, right? And that's going to require a lot of different agents. So that's a big bucket for us. And that work is still ongoing, but we're starting to launch things like functions and our content management system. The second is integrations, and I think what's really exciting here is we just launched functions last week, and functions is the ability to create, again, like modular integration systems essentially. So you can build a send email function, and once you've done that, the developer is able to sort of plug that up. They write in JavaScript, they hit set up all the API endpoints and things. Once that's done, the designer doesn't have to know how to use it at the technical level. They just need to know what variables am I giving this function. That's it. So they're able to drag it in. The reason we built that system was it's going to help teams collaborate that are larger, where maybe the designer and the developer don't have time to hop on a call. The designer just wants to go to the Trilogy function library and say, okay, great, what do I need? Okay, great, Colin's already built this. I'm going to drag this in. Awesome. And Colin's documented like the input variables, the output variables, the description, like what it's going to do, etc.
You're very optimistic about my documentation.
Yes, that's the dream, right? Is
that's the dream, yeah.
Is it gets used that way. And then what's really exciting, like the big vision that we're trying to work towards is, there's 250,000 Voiceflow users out there. How do we help our customers start to build functions for each other, right? Because there are only so many functions that Trilogy can build. There's only so many functions that Voiceflow can build. But as a community, we can build everything, right? We can have 100,000 integrations that integrates with every possible software vendor out there to be able to build agents just super easily. And so that's a big thing we're working towards as well. So actually, probably about an hour, we're going to be launching the functions marketplace. So that's coming out today. Not in app, that'll be outside of app, just because it's a little bit easier and faster to get that going. But you'll start to see people like building and sharing functions for each other. And we're going to have to do a whole bunch of checks on our end to make sure that like code is checked and all that. So right now we're actually manually reviewing every single function submitted, but over time we hope to get a system where if you're importing a function, you know that the code is kosher. So anyways, that's the integration side. And then the last is we just want to get a lot deeper on being an LLM native and LLM first platform. And so for us, that's like prompt libraries, prompt version control, more model support, the ability to bring your own model, the ability to hook up open source models, better fine tuning, like really everything on how do you become like a great LLM first product. That's a big part of our roadmap as well. And so I'd say those are the 3 sort of big buckets. One is like agent scale and like organization scale, like kind of collaboration, not just at the team level, but at like the org level. 2 being like the integrations ecosystem, like just making it easier to work with data with your agents. And then lastly, how do we just make it so that, Voiceflow is the best way to work with LLMs when it comes to building AI automation. So those are the buckets.
Cool. Excellent. Well, all exciting, and we'll definitely deploy all of them. But the functions and the cross-platform, obviously for the 80 or so ones that we have running at the moment, and we're planning on scaling that up. It's going to be huge. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me today. Greatly appreciate the time. And thank you, folks. Next episode coming out in a couple of days. And thank you very much, Braden and Voiceflow.
Great. Thanks, Colin and Trilogy team. Always great to chat with you guys.